Hey, everybody. It is the countdown for Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024. It is 9 o'clock in the East, 6 o'clock in the West. I am Reed Galen. I'll be your air traffic controller tonight. The beloved and one and only Tara Setmeyer is up in New York dealing with the crazies on national television. Being fancy and being in studio. So we will wish her back. She's better than all of us put together. So she'll be back on Thursday with Rick. Anyway, joining me tonight, Joe Trippi, Rick Wilson, Stuart Stevens. Okay, guys, New Hampshire. I want to go to Stuart first. As of this moment, Donald Trump is up 9 on Nikki Haley. I think it's 40. Let's see what I've got here. 53-45. So that's actually 8 points now. So Stuart, you were there when George Bush was supposed to win and lost by a lot. Donald Trump will win the New Hampshire primary, but is this a win for him in 2024?
Yes, it's a win. I'd like to say
a win is a win, y'all.
You know, Reed, all the races that we did, we always won by more than 8.
Yeah.
But usually you go to New Hampshire, either get my ass kicked or win by, small margin. When to win by 8 in a 2-person race like this, I think the key number, what's really going to be fascinating to watch, and they break this down, Secretary of State does, what does Trump get in Republicans versus independents? And if you go back to McCain, you and I both battle scarred, Reed.
Right.
When McCain won by 19, it was close, 19.
Right.
He only won Republicans, I think, by 2. Which, we went around saying that like a spin. Well, they only won Republicans by 2. And people looked at us like, you're out of your fucking mind. You lost by 19, dude. Shut up. But I suspect that, and the other key number is going to be what percentage of the electorate are independents. If it's anything north of 38 to 40%, that'll be really high. There's not a Democratic primary that's functioning. So, I expect Nikki Haley will declare victory, but, this isn't a Bill Clinton-like situation where,
Yeah, she said she's got it. She's, see you in South Carolina, but.
All right. Well, but just as an aside, before we say anything, President Biden did win the Democratic New Hampshire primary, such as it was, even if it wasn't official. In a write-in by more than Donald Trump, who was actually on the ballot, won by. So there's that. All right. So Rick,
excuse me, Reed. What'll be interesting is to look at the total number of votes in that.
Right.
I'd be really interested to see.
I believe it's 27,000 last check.
Right, but let's be clear about this, though. As my dad told me the other day when we were talking about Iowa, if David Yepsen says you won Iowa, the next day you won, right? Same thing with New Hampshire. If you won the New Hampshire primary, the next day you won, right?
Yeah.
Romney won it by 3 votes in Iowa.
Right. So, all right. So, Rick, is there any good news to take out of yet another Donald Trump victory here?
Here's the good news, and I think this is something that we ought to really contemplate. Right now, they came out of Iowa with this very big head of steam for Trump. There was a perception that the Trump team was more professional, squared away, etc. But if you guys all know the people I'm talking about, and folks, if you're listening, you'll know their names soon enough. Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, just because Trump only won by 10, they are not having a good night tonight. I wouldn't be surprised if they were fleeing in an unmarked car to the Vermont border.
Being chased by hurled ketchup bottles, right?
It's not far to Canada.
Right. But I guess, that's the thing, Joe, you've done a lot of New Hampshire races, and I want to touch on something that Rick is saying, which is there is an expectations game inside a campaign headquarters. And nothing bigger than Trump, which is Trump wants a big win. He wants a decisive win. He even went on, he was going on the Truth Social thing to complain about, how he really won with Republicans. So even when he wins, he has to remind people he won.
Yeah. And he didn't get I don't think anywhere near the margin he he wanted or he expected. So,
Right.
so they're in trouble because they didn't meet his expectations game. But look, I think there were plenty of things that came out of this. One, the fact that 94% of Nikki Haley supporters in the exit poll said they'd be disappointed if Trump was the nominee. And I understand what Stuart's saying about a lot of these people were the, don't declare independent folks.
Right.
But you need those people to win in November.
Exactly.
Right.
And
Yes.
29% of them said they were conservatives. She got 29% of people who self-identified as conservatives, not just the huge numbers she ran up with people who consider themselves moderates or independents. So, and then within that, you have 94% of everybody, the conservatives, the moderates, the independents that went for her, saying, I'll be disappointed if Trump's the nominee. Those are all, that's the Bannon line expanding, in my view.
Yep.
I mean, and we're seeing it.
Right.
We're seeing it happen, and that's the group that we have to go after in the general election to make sure Trump does not return to the White House. So
Joe,
I think there are a lot of things. Yeah,
Joe,
another really interesting stat I'd like to see is how many people came and registered today to vote, which they have same-day registration in New Hampshire, and how many people switched from Democrat to independent today to vote. A bigger number, I think, would indicate her real cross-party appeal.
You're exactly right, Stuart. I mean, that's what I think. I think what she demonstrated today was that she would be a better candidate against Biden than Trump because of that appeal. And clearly, a lot of independents that would have maybe leaned Democrat, voted in a Democratic primary, didn't do that, given how horrible Dean Phillips did today. They voted in the Republican primary because they were attracted by her.
Go ahead, Rick. Go ahead.
I have three observations out of the exit polling. Two I think are really good. One I think is a interesting mixed bag. The first is 67% say they don't want a national abortion ban. Okay, and New Hampshire, weirdly, for as iconoclastic as New Hampshire is, that number should scare the shit out of Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell, and Mike Johnson. It should also scare the hell out of these Republican legislatures that are out there in this spring with a whole suite of new anti-abortion bills, because they are cruising for the proverbial bruising. The second number that I thought was fascinating was that a majority is opposed to mass deportations as a condition of pathway to citizenship. They don't want it. And the third number, which I think is good and bad, is they think immigration is more important than the economy. But my theory of the case on that is because the Republicans and Fox have realized the economy is improving, they've changed the topic that Republican voters are being fed to immigration.
Well,
so
Rick,
those are the exits I thought were pretty fascinating.
You can't discount their concern about the Quebecois coming south.
This is true. The Maple Peril.
They're driving.
Listen. When I see Dan Aykroyd, I say there's a threat.
There, I tell you, those Lexuses, they just keep. What was it that Pete Wilson said?
With their funny accents and their good education.
And their manners.
We can't stop them, and they keep demanding par for their dollar.
The thing I thought was interesting in the exit poll, though, was how when they asked, like, are you enthusiastic about the future of the country? Are you feeling good about the future of the country? Do you feel okay about it, or do you feel poor? That it's going poorly. Haley defeated him in every one of the categories except those who felt poorly about the future of the country. And that
he's
group,
a loser candidate. He's
a
depressing guy.
Nuked her. Then the other one was, are you enthusiastic, satisfied, somewhat satisfied, disappointed, or angry about the way things are going in the country? Go look at that number, because she defeated him in every one of the categories except guess which one? Angry.
Angry.
which was again like 30%. Everybody else, 70% fell into like satisfied,
So,
but
let
angry.
me
They were off the charts for him.
let me
tells
go
you where
back to the
party's going.
immigration thing though, because I think it's interesting I think Rick is right, which is what starts in the wacko wings, makes its way to the mainstream media.
100%.
But what I would also say is that I'm a little bit interested that right now the White House, Mitch McConnell, and Chuck Schumer are working to get an immigration deal done. And it is now the Republicans from Mike Johnson down who are saying no. In fact, that guy, that nut Troy Nehls, who was a sheriff down near the Valley, is saying we're not going to get a deal done because we don't want to give Joe Biden a win. Like, these people say that stuff out loud.
Yeah, no, it's really true, Reed. Yeah, let me just read one other thing here in the exit polls that I think, if I was in the Biden campaign, I would think is very good news. 8 in 10 of Trump voters said they'd be dissatisfied if Haley won the nomination, while roughly 9 in 10 Haley voters said they'd be dissatisfied if Trump won the nomination. That is sweet news for the Biden campaign.
But remember that going back to the Iowa exit polls last week, 77% of Haley voters said they would not vote for Donald Trump in November. And that's Iowa. This is New Hampshire. That was Iowa. Now, 43% said they'd go to Biden, right? And then the balance were, RFK Jr. and a third party candidate. All right, let's see but the point is that he has not consolidated the Republican Party. I think that's, to me, the last 2 weeks have been bad for Trump because he hasn't done it.
To ask this question, so far in this process, how many non-white voters have there been? I think probably there's more, not as many.
I think you could sit them around a table at a Waffle House.
I think, there could be 4, there could be 5. And what's the country like?
Right.
59% white. So this is a sample that really speaks to exactly what you're saying. If they can't consolidate this white vote, white Republican vote, that is just an absolute nightmare.
That was in the exits. That was all nearly a dead heat. I mean, I think what's fascinating to me is how the press seems to want to, keep sort of like bury the Nikki Haley thing. It's over and it's Trump. And I think that there's a misread here because, she was at 18, 19 in Iowa. She gets to 40, 45, whatever it's going to be in this one. I thought her speech tonight actually made a lot of good points. And I think for a lot of people across the country who haven't been paying attention, they saw for the first time, hey, there's some other person out there. As much as we have all focused every minute of this, I think there are a whole lot of people who watched tonight may have watched her for the first time in their lives. And we don't know what how much the national polls will change or whether South Carolina changes or not. But so far, Reed's right. If he hasn't consolidated the Republican Party right now, if you start to see, like, if the exit were accurate, that she won 29% of the conservatives in New Hampshire, there's no way she won 29% of the conservatives in Iowa. No way in hell. She didn't get to. She got 19% of the vote. So is she starting to grow a little bit with people out there who, is the fan line expanding?
Let me take it from the other angle. And Stuart reminds us of this a lot when we talk, which is the best word in marketing is new, and Donald Trump is anything but new. Right, and so, okay, he won Iowa. Okay, he's won New Hampshire. But again, back to this whole consolidation thing, guys, Rick, is it one of those things where, okay, we always talk about his hold on the party in the intensity, but something that Joe mentioned when we talked on the podcast last week is that the intensity that he has is with people for whom there are less now, right? The party is older, whiter, right? Less educated, right? And further out into the exurbs into rural areas.
And more men and more men, fewer women. Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So consolidate all you want, but now you're consolidating a dwarf star theoretically.
Right. You can see that in tonight. When you come down to it, men, 53% voted for Trump, 45% for Haley, 56. So that was race, excuse me. 58% of men voted for Trump, 40% of women. 49% for Haley with women, 48% for Trump. The number of women expanding in the pool, okay? The number of younger people will be expanding. And Trump's best numbers tonight, ironically, were with younger Republican voters. But this idea that the demographics and the actuarial tables aren't working is ridiculous. They're working.
Yeah.
Well, and Stuart's been saying that. Stuart, give us your line about people under 18.
But people under 16 years and younger, the majority are non-white.
And by the time they turn 18, they will probably
odds look good. I'm a product of Mississippi Public Schools, so I can't go that far, but it looks good. Something on this conservative thing, I'm surprised this didn't get more press, or maybe I just missed it. But Nikki Haley was endorsed by the union leader. The classic conservative laying on of hands.
Because again, Trump's not a conservative.
It's really important to remember that.
Yeah,
is that they think he is, but he's
not. And the definition of a conservative, a self-identifying conservative in Iowa and a self-identifying conservative in New Hampshire are going to be very different animals.
I think that, in fact, you could make an argument in today's world, they're almost direct opposites.
Yeah, there's yeah.
I mean, the evangelical Christian nationalists who want government to control everything through the Bible live free or die in New Hampshire.
Down to South Carolina, baby.
In New Hampshire, you're in a town hall. Your candidate's in a town hall. What are they going to get asked about? Taxes.
Yeah.
Government. Size of government. Yeah. What are you going to do to stop all these regulations? You go to Iowa, and it's, do you want a 14-second abortion ban?
Right.
Will you put the 10 Commandments in classrooms, etc.?
Well, wait till you get to South Carolina. They make the Iowans look like Maoists.
They make Iowa look like,
Yeah. But before we get to South Carolina, a couple of things. One is, why don't we take a quick break? Michelle, why don't we roll out what exactly it is we're facing when Donald Trump eventually does become the nominee, and if he becomes president? Let's do God Made a Dictator.
Oh, yeah.
And on the 8th day, God looked down on his planned paradise and said, I need a man to test the will and goodness of a free people. So God made a dictator. God said, I need a man who failed in everything but theft and broken promises to live in a golden palace and convince the poor he serves their needs. So God made a dictator. God said, I need a wicked man to lead the common folk with hatred and fear. So God made a dictator. God said, I need a corrupt man who is above the law and immune from justice. So God made a dictator. God said, I need a man who will use violence to seize power. So God made a dictator. God said, I need a man whose followers will call black white, call evil good, and call criminals hostages. So God made a dictator. God said, I need his political party to obey without question, and the press fear his wrath. So God made a dictator. God said, I need a cruel man who uses his power and position to punish and harm his opposition. So God made a dictator. God said, I need a man who breaks the faith of even his most godly followers and leads them to idolatry. Place him above me. So God made a dictator. And then God said, I sent this man to test you, and until you cast him down, you have failed. So God made a dictator.
So let me just say, aside from the brilliance of that,
absolutely nothing to do with the creation of that ad. I think it is probably the best political ad ever made.
Yeah, I'll tell you, as someone who spent every summer in Canton, Ohio with my grandmother, who was a religious, almost, deity like follower of Paul Harvey, right? I think there's a whole bunch of us who grew up in our grandmother's kitchens for whom, even if we don't really remember him, like we remember the voice, and it goes right into that place. Right. All right. So guys, let's talk about a couple of things. One is, all right, so we have 30 days to the South Carolina primary. Now, we should make sure that we respect our friend John Ralston, because the We Matter state of Nevada does take place for Republicans before then. I believe on February 6th, that's a caucus, which doesn't, or a primary, which doesn't have any delegates. And then a caucus, I believe, on the 8th, which doesn't appear that Haley's appearing in either. And, Ralston always points out that they do matter, but in this case, right, it will be uncontested and it's always not as big a deal.
Nevada is a caucus, right?
It's both. Yeah. It's both for whatever kooky reason. But again, I don't think that Haley ever thought she really had a chance in Nevada to begin with. But let's talk about like what the next 30 days look like. Stuart, as you noted, like we've all been in South Carolina for presidential campaign season. It is ugly, 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 ugly. Now, Haley was governor there. I think she was pretty popular when she was governor. I think obviously the party's changed since she was there.
Right.
But she can live off the land too, right? She's got a lot of, probably stuff that she can go do. She can move around the state pretty easily. So Stuart, if you had to lead Nikki Haley's campaign into South Carolina, understanding the odds, like what are you doing?
I think it starts with Trump being alleged to have a black baby. That's the South Carolina way.
My experience, guys, in South Carolina is
Oh
more
God.
like sort of an Oxford Union debate.
Mm-hmm.
Very
You know,
high-minded.
I am on this
really
show
good.
with you. I'm on the show with you. You know that, right?
I've heard that other people have had, really different
I
experiences.
love you, Joe.
But to me,
Your brother.
it's always at the very highest level. I think what Nikki Haley's going to find out is everybody that she pissed off in South Carolina when she was governor is going to come hunting for blood.
Yeah,
And-
Henry McMaster, item 1.
Yeah. I mean, when you can't get the guy you appointed to the Senate to endorse you just out of a sense of obligation or shame, that's like a bad leading indicator. Here's a question. If Nikki Haley was running against Donald Trump for governor of South Carolina, who would win?
Well, Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Donald Trump.
Yeah. And I think that's always a good question to ask in these things. I think Trump would win the primary and win the general. I think even if Nikki Haley won the primary, she probably wouldn't win the general. I think Nikki Haley's best hope is external forces involving health. Normally you would say, well, the guy something might happen. He might get indicted. But, the problem now is she hasn't been indicted enough.
All right, so let's talk about that because we were talking about this morning, guys. The press has started to pick up on Trump's gaffes. They have started to pick up and spread around, the video of him dragging his foot into the Iowa hotel, in the weirdness. And my question is this is something we talked about. A couple of things. One is I think he's tired, right? He hasn't actually had to be out this much, and he's also
COVID.
he's also
work this hard.
Right. He's also spending time in courtrooms, which whatever emotionally energy he has is probably draining him just by watching his moron lawyer.
I think he puts on a good front there, but I think it's very emotionally draining. I think that's a really good point.
And then also, you mix that with this is probably the first time in a long time, guys, right? That like the press is all there, right? They're all on the riser together. They're all watching it. They're all on social media watching us saying these things, watching the Biden campaign come through this. Then they're going back to whatever bar they're hanging out in Manchester, and they're talking about it too.
Well, I'd say there's a couple things, though, that I think people are discounting that we probably shouldn't. The first is, as we've all talked about, no one gets out of the race because they just suddenly decided they don't want to be president or they can't win.
Right.
Because they ran out of money.
Right.
So the question is, as we sit here and it's, looks like 8 points now, does her money keep flowing? Because if the money keeps flowing, if that's enough, I mean, for the big donors to keep putting it out there, she's going to stay in. The second thing I think is that, and we know this now, having a ton of money for TV doesn't really matter because at this point it's going to start being the press coverage of in other words, there's such volume of social media and everything else, and I think tonight when she in her speech said if you don't fear me, then you won't have any problem debating me. I think we're going to get a lot more of that kind of stuff from her in the sort of earned media sort of stunt stuff, but he's going to have to deal with it, and the more he we'll see how he handles it. But so far on social, on Trump social, he's not doing Truth Social. He's not handling it real well. Yeah. So I just think that we could be. I'm not he's going to be the nominee most likely. I got that. I'm just saying, I think that it's not going to take a lot of money to stay in till then. And I think some of the externalities that we talk about could be Trump himself just going off the deep end because she won't get out of the race.
So, all right. So, Rick, that's what I wanted to ask you, because you are the OG never Trump guy, right? Like, you're the guy, first moment he stepped foot on the escalator, he said, this is bad news. We don't want anything to do with this. And to Joe's point, 30 days of insanity, right? 30 days of him saying probably horrible things about Haley, but also we saw both Haley and Sununu, the governor in New Hampshire, now talking about how he's lost his fastball, all of the other stuff. So do you think that this back and forth, again, Trump wins the nomination, he wins the primary in South Carolina, he wins the nomination, but are they building in the ticking time bomb? Because frankly, the Haleys of the world and the donor classes of the world want Trump to lose in November.
They desperately look. Here's the weird part about the donor class. They hate Trump. They were giving DeSantis money before they found out that he was, shall we say, a subpar. DeSantis is like that cut of meat that's labeled substandard but edible. And Nikki was a little better, and they gave her a lot of money too. And so they'll go back to Trump eventually, but this gives them an excuse to wait another month to drag it out further, because they will give the money because they're afraid of him, but they don't want to give the money because aesthetically they hate him. Now, I don't know how much she's going to raise between now and then. I don't know what her longevity is with that class of people. But look, she's got some time. They apparently have, somebody told me today, and I haven't run this down yet, that they have about 12 million in the bank, which used to be an amazing number. Now it's like 2 weeks, 3 weeks of operations. I still don't have a hard estimate on how you go out of South Carolina after that on a Super Tuesday. And by the time you get to March 19th, win enough delegates to beat Donald Trump. There's no math that maths that way.
Right. But again, isn't that the point, is maybe in the next month or so that you ding him up as much as you possibly can, just because by the time remember, because we've got Super Tuesday, which is I think the first week of March, but all the time, right, he's still going to be back in these courtrooms. And even if his case, the Jack Smith case doesn't start in March, it's going to start in April or May. Right. And we talk about the emotional energy. When Stuart and Rick and I were in New York a few months ago, I talked to a former U.S. attorney who'd done mob trials. And he's like, you have no idea. Like, when these mob bosses are sitting at the table and every button man, every hit man, every soldier that ever worked for him is sitting on the witness stand going, yep, he told me to do it. He told me to do it. He's like, you have no idea of the mental decompensation that occurs. And this guy can't afford any.
No. Yeah. He's struggling anyway. And look, and I think that's what everybody in the pro-democracy side needs to do right now, is illustrate for the voters that are coming up in all these swing states. Keep illustrating the insanity, the clear decline in his mental acuity, folks. Yeah. Lincoln put out a little rapid response earlier tonight of just a few of the clips from the last few days of bing bong boom. I mean, it's so much worse than it was in 2016, and it's so much worse than it was in 2020. And with all that mental pressure building up, and also, I think part of what has gotten into Trump's head lately, I think he's starting to believe the messianic hype. I think he's starting to believe that we're in a holy war, that we're in a religious battle, and he keeps referring to that more and more frequently, I notice, in speeches. And I think that's going to surprise him, where a lot of Americans in the general are going to put their hands up and go.
It's going to freak the fuck out of people. Hey, guys, I'm looking at this county returns. Yeah. And, it's really interesting, predictable, I guess. But where she's doing well are, these towns like, Dartmouth. She did well in Dartmouth. She's doing well on the coast. Like Dover, Portsmouth. She won Portsmouth 65 to 34th. She's getting what passes for a Republican yuppie vote.
Right. I was just going to say, the coastal vote are people who live in homes probably 2.5 to 3.5 times the value of people 5 miles more inshore.
Yeah.
But let me ask the Democrat on the panel, because Joe, I'm just thinking of this now, so I could be totally out of my mind. Don't you think that the existence of a Nikki Haley for however short a time reminds Republicans like Stuart and Rick and I used to be and still exist of what Republican Party they had and what they wanted, and the distance between that and Donald Trump?
Absolutely. That's why she's going to get, whether it's single digits or look, I mean, right now it's 8 or 9 points. No one would have predicted that. Well, I mean, I've been for months saying, like, I thought she could win New Hampshire. So I was wrong. Okay. I got it.
But you also pointed out that she had a terrible 10 days.
Yeah.
That probably cost her votes in Iowa and here.
I was a lot closer than a hell of a lot of other people in terms of predicting what was going to happen. But my point is, you're exactly hitting it. It's the suburbs in Des Moines and Johnson County and these independents and those moderate Republicans that she's winning in New Hampshire right now that are saying they'll be disappointed if Trump wins, or that they'll vote for Biden if Trump's the nominee. That is, I just think, is a huge sign of weakness of Trump as the nominee, but they're going to do it again, most likely. Could she delay that for a month or more, or just in pushing forward for another month, keep raising the issues of his competency, of his, like she's starting to do, I think is, and we haven't gotten to Ukraine and Russia yet.
Can we make Trump snap is always the fundamental question.
So I think we have a couple of questions. So Michelle's going to queue up a couple for us, I think. Let's see what we got here. All right. Denise Wheeler asks, how much longer will Haley last? Will she make it to Ohio, or will she be done by Super Tuesday? I mean, I think, Denise, thank you for the question, first of all, and thanks for watching. I think we probably agree, guys, that I don't know about Ohio, but Super Tuesday is probably the outside edge of the envelope, short of a miracle in South Carolina a month from now. Joe?
I was going to say the weird thing about Super Tuesday is that's the one place where there's like 6 states that have open primaries. And I don't know if she can make it. I don't have any clue whether she can make it.
Some of those open, I can't tell you which ones off the top of my head. Some of the open primaries weirdly overlap with winner take all.
Exactly. No, that's kind of like this weird thing where can all the kind of conniptions that the Republicans went through to make sure Donald Trump's the nominee, somehow spiral out of control, and they're open primary and it's a winner take all. She would have to win South Carolina. I mean, she would have to pull off the first miracle would be beating him in South Carolina.
I think there's going to be a Super Tuesday and then an Ash Wednesday for
no, Stuart, I'm just making the argument for how it could happen, but I agree with you. It's not likely to.
Well, normally you would say, what do you say about a guy like, well, what if he got like a jury found him liable for rape? You think that might really knock him out of the race, but
in the old days.
The other thing we don't know is after tonight, what do the head-to-heads with Haley versus Biden and Trump versus Biden look like? I mean, there's I'm not saying that'll have a lot of impact, but what?
Haley will go up in those polls, I think.
That's what I'm saying.
Look, guys, there's another incentive here that we're not focusing on.
Right.
The horse race industrial complex in the media desperately needs this to drag on another 6 weeks. They desperately want this thing to drag on for a while longer. It's good for clicks. It's good for eyeballs.
It's good for those local sales guys.
Good for here we are.
I'll give you an observation.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, the observation I've always had about this is, if you're somebody like Nikki Haley, when you first started out and Trump was going to win, from the get-go, and DeSantis was going to be the guy who challenged her, you get people assigned to you to cover your campaign that are like the third or fourth person down the line. Why? Because the top person took Trump, the second top person took DeSantis, et cetera. So what happens is you're going up, is the guys start shaving in the morning, and you're covering Nikki Haley, and you're starting to say, like, this keeps up, I'm going to be the White House correspondent for my network or for my paper. And so there starts to exactly this. The industrial complex starts to develop muscle memory and stuff to like keep pushing forward, because it's in everybody's interest, both at the clicks level and at the personal advancement level. And so then when you Howard Dean, and you had all the, like, we had the literally the jail. The person for the New York Times that covered the jailhouse in Manhattan got assigned to cover Howard Dean, right? Because we had like some,
and he was like, send me back to Rikers.
Yeah, we had some cub reporter, some from like ABC, from like the Colorado, Denver, Colorado,
Bureau.
Stringer, who was covering us, but they all were like starting to look like, hey, we're going to be if this keeps up.
All right, Rick, and then let's take another question. Rick, go ahead, and then let's take one.
I will say, I
just want to like end this one thing. So I just want what happens is, on the way down, as soon as you gaff your way out of it, they're all saying, son of a gun, this bastard is destroying my career, and I'm going to take him down.
Right.
And it works the other way.
I just did a little quick research. I checked the Ohio primary poll, the last one that was done as of yesterday. Trump is at 71.5% in Ohio.
Yeah. So
a winner take all state.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Right. Exactly. All right. Michelle, why don't we go ahead and throw up that question about Stefanik? All right. Elite Enlightened Illusions, it's a nice name, said, could you imagine Elise Stefanik as vice president? Stuart,
sure.
You know her better than anybody.
Listen, she's actually.
I like Elise's odds as a vice president. She is sufficiently servile. She will do anything. I don't think that she has a gravitas of the sort that people would write the ticket should be reversed, which if he did pick a Nikki Haley, you'd have that story written every day.
Right.
Nikki Haley should be at the top of the ticket. I think that there is some life imitating high school quality for him that he would like to do better in his home state.
Sure.
And so I could see Elise Stefanik. I imagine the vetting would be pretty boring.
Right.
So, yeah.
But let's be clear. I mean, can we just discuss the fact that, like, vetting? Come on.
Well, it's a different vetting process with Trump.
But in her case, I had heard a rumor the other day she wanted to volunteer to run the vetting program. I'm like, I knew this guy who did that.
Yeah, right. How'd that work out?
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, I think that I think the problem is that she's very smart. And I don't think he likes that either.
Stupid. She's hypocritical and I think a little bit evil, because my favorite discovery in the last few days is someone found a picture of Elise during January 6th, crouching down behind a banister, hiding from the hostages.
Yes.
Right.
Hostages.
Yeah, that was a great picture. I saw too.
All right. So, Michelle, as you queue up the next question, let me ask you this, guys. So you talked about the national head-to-heads that are going to show that a Haley's it will likely show that Haley would do better against Biden, right? And that Trump would do worse against Biden. And my question is this, is that, you have that will, anger Trump, right? That will worry his people. They always go back to the base, right? When they worry about that. And I assume that South Carolina will be a 100% base play. And it seems to me now that as we sort of circle back to the beginning of the conversation, Joe, is that every time they do that, they're pushing more and more, specifically women, suburban voters away. And so they're caught in this catch-22, which is every move he makes to shore up the base necessarily pushes away people who they just can't afford to lose.
No, that's exactly right. That's what's been happening from the get-go, and it continues to happen. The longer she stays in, that keeps happening. But the other thing that I still think is the most interesting number in the poll the exit poll, was the 29 points of conservatives that she won. Because if that's real, and she's growing among, that's growing among the Trump base in a lot of ways. Can she do that? Can she continue to grow that in South Carolina? I don't know the answer to that. She has to, because there's not enough, there's no independents that can vote. There's not enough moderates or suburban, et cetera. But is she growing with conservatives who have some problems with Trump, whether it's because of his, personality, whatever. But it looks like in the exit polls that the surprising number for me wasn't what she did with moderates. It wasn't what she did with independents. The surprising number, I think the thing that got her close, it was that she actually moved among conservatives.
Do you now? Let me ask you this: Do you think, Rick, that those are the same kinds of people who, if DeSantis had stayed in the race, might have voted for DeSantis? Because if we go back to the Iowa exit, remember that DeSantis voters in Iowa, their number one issue was abortion, which says to me they knew that Trump's a fraud on the evangelical stuff, or they were done with him one way or the other. So is that did they migrate there, which is like, she's not DeSantis. She's not going to go for the 6, and she's sort of been trying to navigate abortion, although she navigates it back to a national ban.
Interestingly, so is Trump, by the way.
But every time he does that, he then goes on television and says, "I killed Roe."
By the way, I'm the one who killed Roe versus Wade.
Let me just say to our friends. Let me just say to our friends who are worried about college voters coming out for Democrats, please run Donald Trump saying "I killed Roe" 178,000 million times on college campuses between now and November. I promise it will work.
Yeah, see how that works out for the Trump people. Not well.
But I bet this is a guess. 70% of the Republicans who voted in this primary would classify themselves as pro-choice to some degree. Probably the highest percentage of any of the electorates.
Yeah, it really is the state in the beginning that that can get a less than full-throated, supportive, anti-abortion candidate through. Well, I have a question for you guys, and I think this is a one that will be kind of determinative as we go forward. Trump's campaign right now is under a lot of performance pressure to keep him managed, to keep him not crazy. When do you guys think that they're going to layer in further with, bringing in more of the people that Trump finds comforting, like Bannon and Jared and other folks like that? Because I think tonight, again, I'm not kidding about this when I say I think Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, Trump probably expected a 50-point blowout.
They blew it. I mean,
I think they screwed it up. Honestly, I think they did not take enough time and effort here. They did put effort into Iowa, but apparently took this for granted.
Remember, Stuart, that in the 2000 Bush campaign, only a 10-point win in Iowa cost the political director their job.
Yep.
Right.
They're probably taking South Carolina for granted too.
All right. Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we take a quick break? Michelle, why don't you tee up promises for us?
I got rid of Roe v. Wade.
Well, should the woman be punished for having an abortion?
There has to be some form of punishment.
We will root out the radical left thugs that live like vermin.
You would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Trump wrote on social media, "If you go after me, I'm coming after you."
He says, "You're not going to be a dictator, are you?" I said, no, other than day one.
I am your retribution.
So look, I mean, again, we come back to this theme because I think that, Joe, as you noted, I think you're the prognosticator, at least the most successful among us, is that you started to say that the economic numbers would come back, and they are starting to come back. We're starting to see that. It also appears that, and there was a recent survey, I don't recall, that Biden was at like 38% approval, but like 54% of people thought the economy is strong. And we saw that decoupling in the 2022 midterms as well, right? Everybody's like, Biden's down, the economy's down. It's going to be a bloodbath. It was close. Republicans took a few, but it was much closer than anybody thought it would be. And so now, it seems to me as we're moving into this next phase is that Trump is on the stage, literally and figuratively now, right? Like the march has begun. It's really tough to now say, like, well, maybe it won't be him, right? And so let me ask you this: what we call this media training, right? So, Stuart, if you had to talk to our friends in the press corps, what would you be advising them to ask?
You know, I was looking at this. Haley got 24% of Republican vote. I mean, think about that. What's the most interesting question? I mean, I think, you know, I would be asking Haley, is she going to campaign with Trump? And is she going to go out and endorse him? And to what degree is she willing to eat all this that she's increasingly going to lay on him? Because they're going to have a choice. Do they try to play to win? Or do they, you know, get a participation trophy?
Right.
And my bet is they're going to play for a participation trophy. I think she's going to get home. They're going to look at numbers. She's going to be getting crushed in South Carolina. This is a woman that said that Donald Trump is everything I taught my children not to be, and then was his, UN appointee.
And so you believe, as of this moment, you think Haley endorses Trump?
100%.
All right, Rick, how about you?
Look, I think it's the same thing. I think you will end up with Haley. Look, the long stretch between here and the nomination requires Haley to win every single flip of the dice, roll of the dice. It requires her to pull inside straights every single hand, and there is no way we get there. And so I would be asking Haley, I would start digging in on Haley on places where she's actually comfortable and say, how do you think Donald Trump will handle Ukraine? How do you think Donald Trump will handle immigration? What do you think will happen? What would you do differently than Trump? And so you frame her into an area where she's strong and knows things and is not bereft of any policy stripes. And she starts articulating those things. I think she'll expand her ability to make Trump crazy by doing something like that. But again, it's a long trip between here and there. And it's going to take her a lot of discipline to stick with a message like that as we go forward, because it is a real test of discipline when you're out of money, when you're getting beat up every day, when Trump's going to be out there every single day talking about her name, her origin, her race, her gender, all these things. So that's what I try to do. If I were in the media, I would try to frame her and ask questions of her that will put Trump on defense, either because he's watching and internalizing it, or because it's a contrast between somebody who's a serious person, at least at some level,
right,
and versus running against a totally unserious person at every level.
I think one of the
key
indicators here is going to be watch her travel schedule. If she starts campaigning a lot in states past South Carolina, that would be interesting.
And how many trips to New York, LA, Miami, Dallas for fundraisers?
Yeah.
Right.
Because, that's the thing. This is what happened, you remember this well, with McCain. Ultimately, he was out-muscled by Bush. That, he got past South Carolina. He just didn't have the structure in these states to win.
I was just an advanced guy, and we had 10 guys just in Columbia, right?
There you go.
Just in Columbia.
Yeah. And so what is her organization going to look like post South Carolina? I mean, I don't know.
It's tough to see how that runs down.
So Joe, I want to do. You're the last guy on the media training bit, so I want to tell us what if you could advise our friendly reporters to be looking at something, be studying something other than just poll numbers and sound bites. What would it be?
I'd be present for this debate thing.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it helps them, obviously, the press. I mean, whoever can land it, pushing it, and it helps Haley. And by the way, if it happened, that's kind of event that Nikki Haley would need. I think to be on the national stage going with him. He might clean her clock, but if I were the press, that's what I would push for. I'd be asking that question tomorrow. She
But
challenged you, and keep pushing it.
When Christie was still in the race, we had some friends that were close to him, and what I was told then was that they did not want Trump to debate, and Trump had absolutely refused to debate if DeSantis and or Christie were on the stage. But here, this goes back to something, guys, that I think, and then the follow on was the last thing in the world they could afford was their guy on a debate stage, because that puts him in a serious idiom as a fundamentally unserious, insane person. And again, regardless of how you feel about Haley can at least act the part of normal human being. Even DeSantis couldn't do that, right? But she could. And so I think you're absolutely right, Joe, which is they can't afford to have him in a setting like that, either now or frankly against Biden, because the insanity just so clearly is, I don't even know what the word is. It's so clear compared to what's supposed to be happening behind those podiums.
So, guys, can I ask you all a question? We found out tonight that Jen O'Malley Dillon is going from the White House over to the Biden campaign. I think it's good timing. I think it's probably good for the campaign. What do you guys think?
Yeah,
look, she ran it last time. So, I mean, she knows the candidate. She knows the White House. She knows the players she's got to navigate. She's an expert in the digital side of things. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it was imperative that they get somebody from the White House who has Biden's total trust over into the campaign. If it had been me, I would have hoped for that 2 or 3 months ago. But I'm glad that they made that decision and that she agreed to go do it.
Yeah, and I mean, look, she's a serious person, right? She's not going to screw around.
I have a lot of respect for it. One thing that I think is a story here is what didn't happen tonight. Because if there was any chance for there to be any insurgent effort against Biden, it had to happen in New Hampshire. The guy's not even on the ballot. And, you have a history of New Hampshire insurgency campaigns. I can't believe there wasn't a moment when the Biden campaign wasn't kind of worried about this. But it was a nothing burger story. Nobody's even talking about it.
No, it was like a wipeout, and it's a bunch of wasted money and wasted time.
If you were thinking about knocking off Biden, I mean that ship has sailed. Good luck when you get down.
Well, guys, Marianne Williamson got 1,054 votes, so I think that's a ticket out of.
There's an absolute Venn diagram of people who bought her books and voted for her. There's no question about it.
And have a lot of crystals in their house.
Right. There's a lot of crystals and incense burning. All right. Michelle, if you can, let's talk about President Biden for a second. So there was a survey that came out of Pennsylvania, and I think Michelle's got that for us. That I thought was very interesting. So this, and I've got bad eyesight here, but the point is that it's got Biden at about 47, Trump at 39, about 7.5%, not sure, and 5% other. Now, if you'd been listening to all the surveys, of the last year, everybody's saying it's over, it's over, it's over. Biden's a dead man walking. Trump's going to walk all over him. And certainly, look, it's going to be a tough campaign, and none of us, anyone here on these screens, is going to take anything for granted. But I think this all starts to go to what we're seeing. Remember that in 22, Josh Shapiro cleaned Doug Mastriano's clock, right? And it says to me, and I want to, I'll start with Joe and then go down the line, guys, here, which is what we've seen in some of these special elections, what we've seen in some of these local races, what we've seen in some of these gubernatorial races back in 22 is that the normal, competent, confident Democrat cleans the MAGA guy's clock. Now, I know Trump is different, but this appears to be mirroring that. And again, it's a snapshot in time. Much will change. But it seems to me that reality is starting now to catch up with, Biden's accomplishments, the economy growing, and everybody being like, are we really going to do Trump again? Are we really going to do this again? Joe?
Yeah. So the most interesting thing in that number in that poll, I thought, was the numbers you said, but that those numbers existed, that lead that Biden had happened in the same poll where his favorable was 38%. In other words, it just shows that that contrast that helped him in 2020 is even getting bigger, I think, in 2024. And that, and again, like we saw in 2022 with his approval rating low and the economy in a mess, the red wave didn't happen. Here he's got his approval ratings low, but he's defeating Trump by a big margin here, bigger than 2020. And the other thing, though, I think it says is that you have this situation where I think we're seeing again that weakness that Haley's showing with where people in the Republican Party are leaving. People are like not going to vote in this thing. I mean, there's not the energy we see in the turnout today in New Hampshire. I don't think the energy's there for Trump that was there in the past. We'll see.
All right, Rick.
No, look, I think we have there's going to be a lot of media faffing in the next, days and weeks. We've got to make sure we keep it in perspective because, this is a Trump versus Biden race. And it's easy for even us to get caught up in, the breathlessness of the coverage tonight. But as Stuart said, it's a 9-point race in New Hampshire. Okay.
I don't think it's even 9 anymore.
Right. It's one of these things that it's important not to get caught up in the horse race industrial complex, because I think that will take some people off mission. We're going to use this moment while there's chaos between Trump and Haley to do as much damage to Trump as we can, obviously. But it's going to be it's like Trump Hog Day. We got another 30 days of this stuff.
Yeah. All right, Stu.
I think it was a really good night for Joe Biden. There's there's nothing that happened here that was bad for Biden. I think that it shows a ceiling for Trump and his lack of ability to reach beyond hardcore Republican base. I think that probably this lead is going to expand. He's going to start rolling in all these small counties up north, that report later. Just looking at the map here, a lot of these big counties come in. You're going to have, 51% of the vote in now, and you have the majority of the counties haven't reported yet. There's these small counties. Right. So he's probably going to end up, in a trading range between, 10 and 12 points. But what is Trump's message that is going to appeal to people beyond the people that want to vote for Donald Trump today? And I don't think he has one. And they're so in this bubble that they don't know the language, how to talk to these voters. They don't know how to reach out to them. And
that's for sure.
Well, and I think that I think they counted on Trump has said, right, that he wants the economy to tank. He wants the stock market to tank. I think they were absolutely 100% counting on Biden is old as the narrative that could carry them with enough people. I think that now that's being taken away from Trump. I think we started the drumbeat on that back in early December, right? And that's, again, he's not going to be better. All right, guys, we got just a couple minutes left. Joe, give us your parting thoughts here on primary night, New Hampshire.
I still don't think we should discount Haley putting more damage on the guy between now and South Carolina. I think she will. I think she will exit. I agree with you guys, but I think she's going to do some more damage. And I think the debate thing is what I would be pushing.
All right, Rick.
Donald Trump's biggest opponent in this campaign in the primary is Donald Trump.
All right, Stu.
Joe Biden is going to win by 5 points.
All right. I will say this. I'm going to go a little bit with what Joe said here, right? Which is, I think that if I was Team Haley, I'd say, guys, we're not going to win this primary, right? But to Joe's point, we can take a hell of a lot of bark off this guy in the next 30 days. We can help him lose. Then, and then we can go bend the knee, because if we bend the knee, he'll do it, right? And, take us back in. I remember being in Pittsburgh in 2000 when McCain finally endorsed George W. Bush, and finally a member of the media is like, Senator, because he never said it. And he's like, Senator, do you endorse Bush? I endorse him. I mean, it was.
I remember that.
It was a very tense room, to say the least. But the point is like, if they're smart, they'll play this to their maximum benefit. Take as much steam out of him as you possibly can between now and South Carolina, right? Endorse him and say this, never appear again, right? Never appear again, and hope for the best in November. Right. All right. Listen, I want to thank Joe Trippi, Rick Wilson, Stuart Stevens. Guys, check out that Trippi show. Check out the Enemies List with Rick Wilson and Rick Substack. Check out Stuart's writing. Guys, check out the Lincoln Project podcast, my Substack, The Homefront. I want to say thank you to Michelle for making all of this stuff work, because all of us are absolute Luddites. Thanks so much to everybody turning out. We will see you again soon. God bless everyone, and we'll talk to you later.
Good night, folks.
Night, folks.